Disarming can mean a lot of different things. It can deal with munitions. It can deal with, a spiritual or emotional, intellectual. It can deal with disarming people's self-defense mechanisms against propaganda and psychological warfare. But the point is that when you are a small group of people trying to control a huge group of people, the huge group of people is your enemy. So this military leader in Prussia provides us a window into the psyche, into the thinking, into the rationalizations of a lot of the self-appointed ruling class at the time, that they needed to basically wage a war on this large group of people that was going to be unpredictable and capricious and potentially had the power to delay or even derail the agenda of those in power. Like, for example, a bigger Prussian kingdom. I mean, if you just think, like, when we talk about this, people say, oh, conspiracy theory, this is a them-they kind of thing. But I paint this picture because I want people to understand that there is a different psychology. When you are a small group of people trying to control a large group of people like this, and just to go back to my own experience, I was trained to be a teacher, and one of the things that they talk about all the time is classroom management.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And that's a big euphemism, isn't it? Because a classroom is just an open space surrounded by concrete blocks with some desks and a chalkboard. It's pretty self-managing. So what it really is, it's the science of managing human beings. It's the science of group management. And even though we think about education as this cooperative process, that's not how it was explained when I was in school learning it. It's not cooperative. It's strategic and competitive. It's almost like this group of people is an obstacle to your agenda. So, like, that's something that was real for me in the past. Like, I had things that I wanted to accomplish because I had authorities that I had to please. And if the individualistic and self-willed nature of the individuals in that group conflicted with that, it would be a problem. So this is a very real mindset, and it is not conspiracy, and it has gone on this planet for a long time. So I think that's the introduction into this.
Yeah, and by classroom management, it really is, like you said, it comes down to people management, and the mindset that the children get in through that management system. It pretty much lends itself and blends perfectly into the way people are expected to act in society, where in the classroom you're taught that there's the 30 of you, and then there's the one person who doesn't have to follow any of the rules that they enforce on the other 30 people. And when you get out into the real world, it's just a continuation of that. There's the 150 of you, and then there's the 12 people who aren't obligated to follow the same rules that the rest of you are. And it seems like more than anything, that's why I say it seems like more than anything, school is to teach you about how to interact and get along in an authoritarian type society. Sure. Where there's a ruling class that enforces the rules but doesn't have to follow the rules. And then there's the rest of us who all have to blindly follow and obey. And that classroom management, it seems like that's just the very first indoctrinatory stage of what eventually becomes the way that all of us live the rest of our entire lives.
And that's why I'm using total war. When we come back from the break, I can explain exactly why I use that, because total war is a war on all fronts. And education is really an example of that, because the goal with war is efficiency. And when possible, you always want to fight the least formidable enemy. So I can expand on that after the break if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. We're coming up on the break right now. When we come back from the break, we're going to get more into this with our special guest, Brett, from the SchoolSucks podcast. Stick with us. We'll be right back after this break. Let's go ahead and jump back in. We were talking about Prussia and the concept of total war and what that led Prussia to do with the education system. So I'll just let you pick up from there.
Yeah, well, I think, the reason why I go into this issue through von Clausewitz, and that's not something that I always do, but I think it's an interesting way to tell the story. I mean, Prussia is a very militaristic society, and, this idea of total war, completely and permanently disarming an enemy, is a lot of what we see happening in society, where the ruling class view themselves as being in a battle with the masses. And I know how that sounds, but I hope I was able to provide some context just from my own experience as a teacher, that when you are the small group and you're trying to manage the big group, it is a sort of very competitive and even antagonistic, non-cooperative mindset. So the goal with war is efficiency, and you want to always fight the least formidable enemy possible. So, like, if you think about not even necessarily a war, but a struggle, right? Like, if you have a termite problem or a mold problem or some kind of pest or parasite problem at your house, you don't say, well, let's see where this goes. Before we do anything, let's just see what happens. Let's see how big they get. Let's let it grow, and then we'll fight it. That wouldn't make any sense. What's my point? Well, I think that the most efficient way to wage this war was to be able to get to people when they are very impressionable, very small, take them away from their families. And it's not like throughout most of history that families across the world have been very nurturing environments, but for the state, the family is a competitor with respect to allegiances. You know, people would probably be loyal to their family before they were loyal to the state. People would probably be loyal to their communities before they would be loyal to a king or the rulers of their society. So part of the goal with Prussia was this collectivism to kind of say, hey, we're all in this together. And they have some very clever ways for doing that. A lot of them, I think, would be very, very familiar to Americans today. But the instrument through which they accomplish this is this compulsory education system that was originally set up for military and then eventually industrial purposes in Prussia to train people to be exactly what, just to confirm your suspicions, obedient, not creative, not individualistic, to trust, if not worship, authority, and just conduct themselves as far as their own goals, their own lives, and their understanding of the events, how events around them might be important in the long run for them, in just a very apathetic way. So obedience, conformity, and apathy, I say, are ultimately the goals of the Prussian education system that existed in pre-Germany in the 1800s into the Weimar Republic, eventually into the Third Reich. After 3 or 4 generations of that kind of schooling, that's what you get. And of course, that system also came here in the mid-1800s, courtesy of Horace Mann. So one of the reasons why, when we talk about collectivism, we talk about allegiance to the state, even to the point where young children are forced to engage in rituals, chants of allegiance, in school. I mean, that all comes from this Prussian model of education.
Yeah, and Horace Mann, he's often referred to as the godfather of American public education. And you're saying that he adopted and brought a lot of the Prussian education system in. Wasn't Prussia, or I guess, Germany at the time, or I don't know if it was Germany at the time, but wasn't it having a negative effect on the people at the time? Because it seems to me like taking creativity, taking individuality out of a society has negative effects. Why would they want to continue or, initiate this thought process here when it was having negative effects already?
Sure. I think that's a very good question. One of the oldest ideas, I think, in the history of civilization, and more specifically the history of the state, is that human beings are resources. There is not a tremendous amount of value for human life outside of the elites or outside of the ruling classes, that human beings are resources. And we see this go back all the way to, the pyramids got built through the idea that human beings were resources, that human beings could be farmed and treated like animals. So to make that real, to make that relevant in our world, why does that become a model for education when you lose so much productive potential from society? Well, In Prussia, the primary goal was military. They had a kingdom they want to expand. Why have people produce and create when you can just go and plunder other people's resources? And if you need to have an army, you need to have people who are obedient and don't question the orders of authority. When that comes here, the latter half of the 1800s, well, it's more about industrialization.
It's almost, to me, looking at it, it seems like something that will eventually destroy a society. And it seems kind of crazy to me that the people who run a society and the people who basically make their lives off of skimming the fat off of a society, it seems kind of ignorant to me that they would set up a system that eventually kills the innovation, the creativity that creates the fat that they're able to skim. But it seems like it happened in Germany, and it's definitely looking like it's happening here.
Yep.
And I can't really understand the logic of it. I can understand the explanation you gave, but if these people are so smart, I would think that they'd be smart enough to realize that they're basically setting their own time bomb, which is eventually going to blow up on them. Well, stick with us. Oh, you know what? We're coming up on a break.
Sure.
Stick with us, and we'll be back on the other side of the news break. We've got about 6 minutes, and we'll be right back with Live Free FM. We were talking before the break about why they would continue to push this type of education system on us when it's so obvious that it has negative consequences. And when you look around and you see the media that constantly puts out movies and entertainment, even the news seems to be geared towards like a 7th grade intelligence level. You see the creativity that is almost non-existent. You see inventions almost non-existent. The type of thinking that basically made this particular society so successful at first has pretty much been bled out and completely sucked out of the mindset of the majority of people. And it's starting to have these negative consequences that we can no longer deny. And rather than fix the system, it seems like they're just more intent on hammering the system in. We see George Bush pushing for No Child Left Behind, and then we see Obama pushing for mandatory graduation where you're not allowed to drop out. You have to go all the way through until you graduate. And it seems like these are the opposite of what would be a rational, logical approach, and it seems like instead of fixing the problem, they just want to force the problem even further down our throats. And it seems like because they live off of our productivity, to make us even less productive would be a sacrificial move on their behalf, but it seems to be that that's what they continue to do nonetheless. What is your, conclusion on why they continue down the path when it seems like such a self-destructive path?
I don't want to be hyperbolic, but I guess I'm about to be. Why does a farmer, as he's leading cattle to slaughter, why doesn't he stop and say, maybe this cow is supposed to be more than a pile of meat? If you look at these people and the ideas of social Darwinism, applying Darwin's ideas, and some would say Darwin was actually applying these ideas to human beings himself, but people like Herbert Spencer, who was also a eugenicist, an idea of purifying the human race. We see these ideas certainly in Nazi Germany. Hitler felt like he had a fine philosophical grounding for all of the things that he did based on previous German thinkers, people like Hegel and Nietzsche. And we're just talking about a mindset, a psychology that is incomprehensible to people like you and me. So now on this show today, which is about 3 weeks after that Live Free FM interview, let's start trying to make it more comprehensible, even if we can only offer snapshots, because this is quite the panorama that we're looking at here. But you might have noticed in that interview, where we were focused on the Prussian schooling system, that when it comes to people being controlled, I seem to skip over about 5,000 years of human history. And I want to be clear, my thesis is not and has never been that once upon a time in Prussia or anywhere else, things were good and then school came and then they were bad. School is merely a symptom of a larger moral and philosophical corruption in society. but it is a very important symptom. And I think I can explain it like this. We understand how school engenders this dependence on authority, on the state. And I think using that word dependence allows us to draw a very